The hospital corridor smelled antiseptic and hopeless. I sat on the edge of the bed, already dressed in my own clothes, dark blue pants and a loose blouse with a small floral pattern. My gallbladder surgery had been uneventful, but my 68 years were still making themselves felt in the form of a tugging pain under my ribs and general weakness. I gently felt the bandage through the fabric of my blouse. 3 small incisions. Laparoscopy. The wonders of modern medicine. Dr. Jacobs said that at our age, an open cavity is only done in extreme cases. At our age, when was our age? Nurse Sheila, a full-figured woman with a perpetually disheveled ponytail, brought the discharge papers. Mrs. Bonham, can someone help you get home? She asked, handing me a folder of papers and prescriptions. My daughter, I answered with a confidence I didn't feel. She should be here. Peyton had promised, or rather, not exactly promised, but she nodded and said, "We'll figure something out," when I mentioned the discharge 2 weeks ago, during her one and only 10-minute visit. "Great," Sheila smiled approvingly. "I'll get you a wheelchair as soon as it arrives. Hospital policy is that all patients leave the building on wheels." Sheila left, leaving me alone with my phone and my growing anxiety. I dialed Peyton's number. 1 ring, 2, 3, 4, 5. "You've reached Peyton Bonham Ridley. Leave a message after the beep." I dropped the call, realized my daughter could have been in a meeting or busy with a client. The receptionists at dental clinics are always busy, but for some reason, every time I needed Peyton, she was unavailable. So I tried again. This time, after the 4th ring, the phone was picked up. "Mom?" Peyton sounded annoyed. In the background, I could hear women laughing and dishes clinking. "I'm at lunch with Elizabeth. Is there an emergency?" "I'm being discharged today," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. 2 o'clock. You said you'd help me get home." There was a pause. I heard Peyton put her hand over the microphone and say something to the person she was talking to. "Mom, I'm sorry, but I have an incredibly busy day today. I have 3 meetings in a row this afternoon. Then I have to pick up Ashley from practice. We're all really busy. Call yourself a cab." I felt something inside of me clench, not from surprise, I'd almost seen that answer coming, from something deeper, more painful than post-op discomfort. "I'm not sure I can make it from the cab to the door on my own," I said quietly. "It's hard for me to bend over and—" "Mom," Peyton interrupted me, "the driver will help. They usually help elderly customers. Look, I really have to go. Call me tonight and let me know how you're doing." The phone beeped briefly. I slowly put the phone down. Sheila was standing in the doorway, holding the handles of her wheelchair. I could tell by the look on her face that she had heard part of the conversation. "Mrs. Bonham, is everything okay?" "Yes," I tried to smile. "Just a slight change of plans. I need to call a cab." Sheila frowned. "Are you sure? After a surgery like this, you're going to need help, at least for the first day." "I don't have much choice," I shrugged, feeling the stitches tighten under the bandage. "My children have their own lives. They're very busy." Sheila muttered something that could mean either agreement or disapproval and started helping me pack the rest of my things. "My shift ends in an hour," she said finally. "I could—" "Bonham? Merle Bonham is here?" A hoarse, smoky voice interrupted Sheila's sentence. A tall, thin woman in her 70s, with a lock of gray hair gathered in a careless bun, appeared in the doorway. She wore worn jeans, a man's plaid flannel shirt, and a worn leather jacket. The unexpected guest looked around the room with an appraising gaze, lingering on me and the wheelchair. "Delroy?" I said in surprise, recognizing my roommate. "What are you doing here?" Delroy Scullin had lived 2 doors down from me on Maple Street for almost 20 years. We weren't close friends, more like polite neighbors. occasionally exchanging phrases about the weather or swapping surplus crops from our small gardens. I've come to see Lou Pritchett, Delroy said as she entered the room. The old devil finally decided to have his knee replaced. His room is down the hall. She glanced at my bag and wheelchair. You're being discharged? Yeah, I nodded. I was just about to call a cab. Delroy squinted. What about yours? She waved her hand vaguely, implying family. Sheila coughed delicately and left the room, giving me a sympathetic look. Busy, I answered briefly, feeling the sting in my eyes. Everybody's got their own thing going on. Delroy grinned and, without a word, pulled a tattered key with a horseshoe-shaped fob out of her jacket pocket. I've got a pickup outside, she said in an unapologetic tone. I'll give you a ride. You don't have to, I protested automatically. I don't want to. I didn't ask what you wanted, Delroy interrupted. I'm saying I'll drop you off. I'll check on Lou some other time. That old stump ain't going nowhere. Sheila came back with a bag of meds and instructions for me. When she heard Delroy's decision, she was visibly relieved to help me into the wheelchair. You'll need help the first few days, she said, leaning toward me, especially with groceries and cleaning. No heavy lifting for at least 2 weeks. I'll be fine, I replied, avoiding looking at Delroy. Wouldn't be the first time. 20 minutes later, I was gingerly settling into the cracked leather seat of Delroy's ancient pickup. The vehicle, like its owner, looked rough, tattered by life, but undeniably reliable. Put the bag in the back, Delroy commanded, starting the engine. And buckle up. I don't drive like your young nurses. As they pulled out of the hospital parking lot, Delroy lit a cigarette with the side window down. I'd never approved of smoking, but now the smell of cheap cigarettes was strangely soothing. Something real, not sterile, not smelling of antiseptic and fake care. I didn't know you were in the hospital, Delroy said, breaking the silence. Otherwise, I would have stopped by sooner. Laparoscopy, I answered. Biliary, nothing serious. At our age, Delroy chuckled, even a runny nose is serious. And when they're stabbing you, we drove through the familiar streets of Reading. It was a clear spring day, and the trees were already green. I looked at the houses, the stores, the parks, and remembered how Claiborne and I had first come to Reading 37 years ago. Young, hopeful, with little Peyton in our arms and Tamsin on the road. Everything seemed simpler then, clearer. How long has Peyton been coming by? Delroy asked, as if reading my mind. She stopped by for 10 minutes 2 weeks ago, I answered. She had kids, a job. You had kids and a job too, Delroy interrupted. And you had time to drive your mother to the doctor when the old lady was sick. I remember, I didn't say anything. What could I say? That times had changed? That kids were different? Or was it just me? We turned onto Maple Street, a row of neat one-story houses with small, well-kept lots. I recognized mine at once, white with blue shutters, with 2 rhododendrons on either side of the porch. Claiborne had planted them the year they bought the house. Now the plants had grown into lush bushes, outliving their gardener by 5 years. Delroy shut off the engine and, without waiting to be asked, stepped around the pickup to help me out. Her dry, wiry hand was surprisingly strong. Keys? She asked when we reached the porch. I pulled a bunch from my purse. The movement felt like a sharp pain in my side. I cringed involuntarily. Give it to me. Delroy took the keys. And don't make any unnecessary movements. You don't want the stitches to come apart. Inside, the house was cool and quiet. Delroy walked straight into the living room and sat me down in my favorite chair. Okay. She looked around. Where's the first aid kit? In the bathroom, top shelf, I answered. But I was given everything I needed. Ignoring my words, Delroy headed toward the bathroom. She returned a minute later with a vial of painkillers and a glass of water. Drink it, then rest. I'll take a look around. Without waiting for an answer, she disappeared into the kitchen. I heard cabinets opening and closing, water running. Left alone, I looked around my living room. It was just as I'd left it 5 days ago, when the ambulance had taken me away with an acute seizure. Peyton had promised to stop by, check the house, but judging by the layer of dust on the coffee table, that hadn't happened. Or maybe her idea of a checkup was different from mine. There were family photos on the mantelpiece, me in my prom dress, Claiborne on our wedding day, Peyton and Tamsin, small with pigtails and gap-toothed smiles, Peyton's high school graduation, Tamsin with her first boyfriend, grandchildren, 3 from Peyton, none from the perpetually single Tamsin, and the last one, Christmas 5 years ago, last Christmas with Claiborne. He already looked tired, but no one expected a heart attack to take him in 3 months. Your refrigerator's a mess, Delroy said, coming back into the living room. The cabinets are full of canned goods and cereal. Enough for dinner, but you'll starve tomorrow. I was going to order delivery, I mumbled. She was going to order delivery, Delroy grumbled. Who's going to carry the boxes? You too? She glanced at her watch, an old wristwatch with a worn leather band. Look, it's almost 4. I'll go to the supermarket, get the essentials. Give me the list. Delroy, don't. The list, I said, the neighbor said. Or I'll decide what you need. I don't think you're going to like eating canned beans for a week straight. I sighed and dictated a short list of groceries. Delroy nodded, memorizing it. Take your meds on schedule, she said, heading for the door. I'll be back in an hour. I put the kettle on. Don't lift anything. The door closed behind her, and I was alone. The silence of the house, usually cozy, now seemed pressurized. I looked at the pictures again, at the smiling faces of the children and grandchildren. We're all very busy. Call yourself a cab. How many times had I heard similar phrases over the years? Sorry, Mom, we can't make it today. We'll stop by next weekend. The kids are so tired after school. Waldo has an important meeting. There was always a reason, always something in the way, and now there's a cab. Strange that it took surgery and the help of strangers to see what may have been in front of my eyes all along. My children were grown, had built their own lives, and in those lives there was simply no room for an aging mother, except when they needed something. To watch the grandchildren, to borrow money for a new car, to cook a Thanksgiving turkey. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. I hastily wiped it away. It's silly, at my age, crying over something like that. Kids are kids. They have their own worries. I can handle it. I always have. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the layer of rational explanations and maternal forgiveness, a new feeling began to emerge, something akin to a realization, an epiphany. For years, I've given time, love, money, care. And what did I get in return? Rare phone calls, formal visits on holidays, and a cab on the day I was discharged from the hospital. I looked at the pictures again and thought for the first time that my children had taken my care for granted for years, never reciprocating. The kettle in the kitchen whistled, bringing me out of my reverie, but I was in no hurry to get up. Delroy would be back soon. The week dragged on slowly, like molasses on a cold day. I was slowly getting used to my new condition. No gallbladder, 3 small scars on my side, and a strange feeling that something inside me had changed, and it wasn't just anatomy. Every morning at 9 o'clock sharp, Delroy knocked on the door. No call, no warning, just a bag of groceries, a fresh newspaper, or some household item. She didn't ask permission to clean the house or make dinner. She just did it, then sat in the kitchen with a cup of strong black coffee and a cigarette she smoked out the open window. Delroy, you know you don't have to do this, I said every morning. I know, Delroy answered each time, and you know you can stop saying it. By midweek, I gave up trying to protest. After all, I did need help. The pain was tolerable but constant, especially with sudden movements. And Delroy, despite her gruff demeanor, was a surprisingly good nurse. Perhaps it was her experience as a nurse. On Saturday, a week after she was discharged, Delroy showed up early with a bag of fresh rolls and 2 cups of coffee from the new coffee shop. I have business in town today, she announced. I won't be back until this evening. Lunch is on the stove. Chicken soup. You can heat it yourself. I don't want to see a mop in your hands. I'm not a child, I said, but without irritation. I can handle it. She left, leaving behind the smell of cigarettes and cheap men's cologne. I was finishing my coffee and flipping through the morning paper when I heard the sound of a car pulling up. I looked out the window and saw my daughter's silver SUV. In the passenger compartment, besides Peyton, I could see the figures of her husband and children. My heart shook. Grandchildren. I hadn't seen them in almost 6 months since Christmas. The older ones, twins Benjamin and Ashley, were already in middle school, and the youngest, Zoe, had started first grade last year. I hurried to the door as fast as my condition would allow. Peyton stood on the doorstep, slim, trim, with flawless makeup and her hair done up in a fancy updo. Next to her, Waldo, a short man with thinning hair and a good-natured face, was shuffling from foot to foot. Behind them, the 3 children loomed, staring at their cell phones. Mom, Peyton pecked me on the cheek. You look good for someone who's had surgery. It's good to see you, I smiled, trying not to show how much the not bad hurt. Come on in. I was just about to heat up some soup. Waldo hugged me awkwardly, mumbling something about a speedy recovery. The grandchildren, after a stern shout from their mother, broke away from their screens and took turns coming up to kiss their grandmother. Only little Zoe hugged me sincerely, clinging to me with her whole body. Grandma, are you a cyborg now? She asked seriously. Didn't they cut something inside you? Zoe, Peyton pulled her back. Don't be silly. I'm not a cyborg, honey, I smiled, stroking my granddaughter's hair. I just had my gallbladder removed. It's a small organ that you can live without. Peyton looked around the kitchen with an appraising gaze. I knew that look, the way she looked at rooms in need of renovation or a closet in need of updating. It's cozy, she finally said. That meant outdated, and we both knew it. I silently walked over to the stove and started heating up the soup Delroy had left. How are you feeling, Mom? Peyton asked. I'm sorry we couldn't get here sooner. This week has been crazy. Ashley's got tennis sectionals, Ben has some science project, and Zoe's? Well, you know Zoe. It's okay, I replied, stirring the soup. Delroy's been helping me all week. Delroy? Peyton frowned. That strange woman off the street? The neighbor? Yeah, she picked me up from the hospital, and she's been coming by every day since. She helps out around the house, brings me groceries. Peyton pursed her lips. I didn't realize you two were so close. You never told me about her. We weren't close, I shrugged. She just happened to be there when I needed her. Lunch passed in awkward silence, punctuated only by Zoe's carefree chatter about school and the twins grumbling that they were bored. When the soup was finished, Peyton coughed and exchanged a meaningful glance with Waldo. Mom, she began, Waldo and I have been thinking a lot about your situation. You need special care after the surgery, and this house, it's too big for one person. It's hard to clean, lots of stairs, slippery bathroom floor. I looked at her in surprise. My house wasn't a mansion, just a regular 1-story cottage with 3 bedrooms, a living room, and a kitchen. No stairs except for 3 steps on the porch. What are you getting at, Peyton? We think you should consider moving to a better place. She smiled her professional receptionist smile. There are wonderful complexes for seniors, with medical care, entertainment, peer socialization. A nursing home? I didn't hide my surprise. I'm only 68, Peyton. I'm quite independent. It's not a nursing home, Peyton hastened to explain. It's an active living complex. You would live in your apartment, but with access to all services. And this house could be sold. It's a great time to sell real estate. And where would the money go? I asked, feeling the tension building inside me. To support you, of course. Peyton looked offended. Mom, we're worried about you. What if you go back into the hospital? What if you fall and can't call? You're all alone out here. The ringing of the doorbell interrupted her speech. I stood up, glad to get away from this conversation. Delroy was standing on the doorstep with a container in her hands. I brought you some homemade soup, she said, coming in uninvited. I made it according to my grandmother's recipe, with giblets and... She stopped talking when she saw Peyton and the others at the table. Ah, company. She nodded. Hello. Delroy, this is my daughter Peyton, I said, her husband Waldo, and grandchildren Benjamin, Ashley, and Zoe. We've heard, Delroy replied dryly, placing the container on the table. We're just having your soup for lunch, Peyton said with a strained smile. Is it good? Delroy grinned. It's delicious, Waldo replied hurriedly. You're a great cook. Delroy gave him an appraising glance and grinned. I'm glad it's to my liking. Well, I won't interrupt the family reunion. She turned to me. Soup for tomorrow. Add the rice when you heat it up. Thank you, Delroy. I thanked her sincerely. Would you like to join us? I noticed Peyton tense up at those words. Not tonight. Delroy shook her head. I have business to attend to. Call me if you need anything. Does she come in like this often? Peyton asked as the door closed behind Delroy. Every day this week, I answered. Cooks, cleans, brings groceries. And what does she want in return? Peyton squinted her eyes. Nothing, I shrugged. Just helps. Mom, you're too trusting. Peyton shook her head. People don't do things for nothing, especially people like that. What kind of people? I could feel the irritation rising inside of me. Well, Peyton hesitated. Weird, lonely. She's clearly trying to gain my trust. Why? I don't know. Peyton shrugged. Maybe she needs money, or company, or whatever. Just be careful. You shouldn't let people you barely know into your house. I've known Delroy for 20 years, I repeated, and she was the only one who offered to help me when I got out of the hospital. Peyton blushed and looked away. Mom, I explained, we had an emergency. After lunch, Peyton sent the kids out to the yard and asked to see the medical records. I took her into the small office that used to be Claiborne's. This is where I kept all the important papers, house deeds, insurance, medical records. The visit dragged on into the evening. As it began to get dark, Peyton announced that they had to go. The kids wandered to the car without objection, and Waldo followed, mumbling awkward goodbyes. Peyton lingered in the doorway. Think about what I said, Mom, she said gravely. This house is too big for you, and it's too old. Face it, you're not getting any younger. I'll think about it, I said, even though I knew I wasn't going anywhere. And about that woman, Delroy, Peyton continued. Don't let her come around too often. It's weird. People are going to start talking. Talk about what? I raised my eyebrows in surprise. Well, Peyton hesitated. Two older women living together. Or almost together. I laughed, sincerely for the first time all day. Peyton, are you serious? I'm 68 years old. I don't care what people say. And neither does Delroy. As the silver SUV disappeared around the corner, I walked back into the house and felt incredibly tired. The family visit had exhausted me more than the entire week of recovery from surgery. I made my way to the study to put away the papers Peyton was looking through. As I opened my desk drawer, I noticed the folders weren't laid out the way I'd left them. I'd always stacked them by date, but now they were jumbled. What's more, the bank statement folder, which I hadn't even pulled out, was on top, slightly open. Peyton was going through my papers, looking for something. Information about my finances, about my health, about my will. A phone call snapped me out of my gloomy thoughts. Tamsin's name popped up on the screen. My youngest daughter, whom I hadn't seen in almost a year. Tamsin? I answered, trying to make my voice sound normal. Hi, Mom. Tamsin's voice sounded strained. How are you? I'm good, I answered. I'm recovering from surgery. Yeah, Peyton said something like that, Tamsin said absently. I'm glad everything's okay. There was a pause. I was waiting. Tamsin was always like that. She never called just to talk. Look, Mom, she finally said, I'm having a little trouble with the apartment. The landlords raised the rent, and I'm not in a good place right now. Could you lend me some money? I'll pay you back as soon as I get a job. It was an old song. Tamsin was always between jobs, always looking for herself, always with financial problems, and I was always helping. Gave away my last savings, cut back on my expenses, just to make my daughter happy. How much do you need? I asked, already knowing that the amount would not be small. $1,000, Tamsin answered. A month at the most. I'm pretty sure I'll get that job at the gallery. $1,000, almost my entire monthly pension. And then there were medical bills that insurance only partially covered. Suddenly, something inside me clicked. The memory of a cold call a cab. The thought of Peyton going through my papers, looking for anything else I could get from my old mom. Tamsin, who hadn't even taken the time to check on me after my surgery, but had called as soon as she needed money. No, I said. What? Tamsin clearly didn't expect a no. I said no, Tamsin. I can't give you money. But Mom, I really need it. There was a pathetic note in her voice. I'm broke. I'll be thrown out on the street. I'm sorry, I said firmly, but I'm going through a rough patch myself. Hospital bills, medication. I can't or won't. There was anger in Tamsin's voice. You have a house and a pension and savings. Don't tell me you don't have money. I have responsibilities, I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. And I have to take care of myself, too. That's fine, Tamsin hissed. Just fine. For once I ask for help, and you refuse. Forget it. I'll manage on my own somehow. She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling a strange mixture of guilt and relief? Yes, relief. For the first time in years, I'd said no, and the world didn't fall apart. At night, I couldn't sleep for a long time. The pain in my side had gotten worse, or so it seemed to me, because of the emotional strain. I lay in the dark, thinking about my daughters, about my grandchildren, about the life that had somehow passed me by unnoticed. I had always been an ATM, a babysitter, a free helper for them. Peyton, always asking me to babysit. Tamsin with her financial problems. They'd show up when they needed something and disappear when they got it. And I always gave, because that's what I'm supposed to do, because I'm a mother. But who's going to take care of me when I can't really take care of myself? Not Peyton, with her plans to put me in an assisted living facility. Not Tamsin, who can't even take care of herself. Delroy, a stranger basically, did more for me in a week than my own daughters had done for me in years, simply because she saw someone in need and reached out. In the darkness of the bedroom, to the monotonous ticking of the old clock, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let my children use me anymore. Enough was enough. It was time to start living for myself while there was still time left. Tuesday morning greeted me with unexpected determination. I woke up before the sun had even risen, with a clear understanding of what I had to do. A thought that had started the night after Peyton's visit had turned into a firm intention over the course of 3 days. I lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the details. I had to be careful not to arouse suspicion. Delroy showed up at 9, as usual, this time with a bag of fresh croissants from the bakery and a thermos of coffee. "You're looking better," she said, pouring coffee into cups. "Your complexion isn't as good as a dead man's." "What an exquisite compliment," I grinned, accepting the cup. "I'm not one to be coddled." Delroy shrugged. "If I say it's better, it's better." I took a sip of coffee, gathering my thoughts. What was the best way to present my request? "Delroy," I began cautiously, "I need to see a lawyer. I want to file a medical power of attorney, in case I end up in the hospital again." Delroy squinted, looking at me over her cup. "Who are you going to file it for?" "Not my daughters, that's for sure," I said bitterly. "Maybe on you, if you don't mind." Delroy raised her eyebrows in surprise, but nodded. "Why not? When do you want to go?" "Tonight, if possible. I already called Mr. Harlan, and he said he could see us at 11. "Us?" Delroy squinted again. "You'll need to sign some papers." I tried to sound confident, though my insides clenched with excitement. I wasn't used to lying. "If you agree, of course." "I do." Delroy nodded. "At least you're doing something sensible. After that cab ride, I thought you'd gone soft." I smiled involuntarily. Delroy was his usual self, even when he agreed to help. He managed to insert a stiletto. At 11:30, we were on our way in Delroy's beat-up pickup toward downtown. My side was still sore, but much less so. The scars were healing nicely. Lawrence Harlan's office was in a small 2-story Victorian building he shared with an accounting firm and an insurance agency. Claiborne and I had gone to him several times, when we bought a house, when we were making a will after the girls were born, when we were finalizing the details of an inheritance after my parents died. Mr. Harlan had aged since our last meeting 5 years ago, when I visited him after Claiborne's death. He'd helped me with the paperwork, bank accounts, and other formalities. His hair was white now, and his face had new wrinkles, but his eyes were still sharp and penetrating. "Mrs. Bonham." He rose to meet us as the secretary ushered us into the office. "It's good to see you, and you must be Mrs. Scullin." He extended his hand to Delroy. "Just Scullin," Delroy mumbled, shaking his hand. "No Mrs. about it." Harlan nodded nonchalantly and motioned for us to sit down. "So, you mentioned medical power of attorney on the phone?" I took a deep breath. Moment of truth. "Yes, that's one reason. But there's something else. Something more serious." I felt Delroy's surprised look on my face, but I continued. "I want to rewrite my house." To Delroy Scullin. There was silence in the office. Delroy froze with her mouth half open, while Mr. Harlan studied my face intently. "Merle, what are you talking about?" Delroy finally exhaled. "Please listen to me." I turned to her. "I've thought this through. I have my reasons." "Are you out of your mind?" Delroy shook her head. "This is your home. It's where your whole life is, where you and your husband—" "That's exactly why," I said firmly. "It's my home, and I want to make sure it goes to someone who really values it, not someone who just wants to sell it." "Your daughters." Delroy nodded understandingly. "Peyton's already talked about selling," I confirmed. "She wants to put me in an assisted living facility and sell the house." "Mrs. Bonham," Mr. Harlan interjected, "such a big decision requires careful thought. Perhaps you should take some time to think about it." "I have already thought it over," I replied. "My daughters have had enough of me. Now I want to dispose of my property as I see fit. Delroy shook her head. Merle, don't do this. Your girls will take offense. They only get offended when I don't give them what they want, I replied bitterly. When they need money or favors, they remember they have a mother. The rest of the time, it's like I don't exist. Mr. Harlan coughed. If you've made up your mind, Mrs. Bonham, I'll help you with the paperwork, of course. But I must warn you that such a decision could lead to family conflicts and even litigation. I understand, I nodded, but the house is all mine. Claiborne left it to me unconditionally. I have the right to use it as I see fit. That's right, Harlan agreed. Legally, you're absolutely right. He turned to Delroy. And you, Ms. Scullin? Are you prepared to accept such an unusual gift? Delroy looked confused. She shifted her gaze from me to the lawyer and back again. Yeah, I don't know, she answered honestly. It's crazy. We're not even related. Sometimes those who aren't related by blood are closer than real relatives, Mr. Harlan said. I've had cases like that in my practice. Delroy, I turned to her. You're the only one I can trust. The only one who's been there for me when I really needed help. I want you to have the house. And if I say no, she asked, then I'll find another way. Maybe I'll bequeath it to an animal shelter. I smiled weakly. But I wouldn't sell it. Delroy looked at me for a long moment, then sighed heavily. Okay, but I'm not signing anything today. I need to think about it. Mr. Harlan nodded. A reasonable decision. In any case, it would take time to finalize a deal like this. You have to prepare the documents, have the property appraised, perhaps make a gift with certain conditions. What conditions? I asked. For example, you can stipulate the right of lifetime residence. Harlan explained. The house would belong to Ms. Scullin, but you would retain the right to live there for the rest of your life. I nodded. That sounded reasonable. Good, let's do that. And let's get that medical power of attorney I was talking about ready. We drove back in silence. Delroy was gripping the steering wheel tightly, staring at the road. I realized I'd shocked her with my proposal, so I didn't rush her into a response. It wasn't until we reached the house that she finally spoke. Why me? She asked without looking at me. Why not some charitable organization or a distant relative? I wondered. Why really? I didn't fully understand my own motives. Because you're real, I finally answered. You don't pretend. You don't play the caring game. You just do what you think is right. I appreciate that, Delroy snorted. Not the best reason to give someone the house. And I also know you're not going to sell it, I added. You realize that a house isn't just walls. It's a memory, a story, a part of a person. Delroy turned to me, something that looked like tears in her eyes. This is about Dylan, isn't it? You've heard the story? I shook my head. Delroy rarely talked about her personal life. What story? She sighed heavily and got out of the car. I followed her. We sat on the porch of my house and Delroy pulled out cigarettes. Do you mind? She asked, showing me the pack. Not today. She lit up, let out a stream of smoke, and began to speak. I had a son, Dylan. Good boy, smart, wanted to be an artist, can you imagine? She grinned. Just like his father, who was also looking for beauty in this lousy world. She took another drag, staring off into the distance. 15 years ago, Dylan died. The car had hit a pole. Rain, slippery road. He was 21. I listened in silence, hesitant to interrupt or comfort. Delroy spoke smoothly, as if she were talking about someone else's life long ago. Herman, my husband, couldn't take it anymore. First he drank, then he just left. Said he couldn't stay in a house where everything reminded him of Dylan. Didn't ask for a divorce, just disappeared. She put the cigarette butt out on the porch railing. And I stayed in that house with those memories because they're all I have left of my son. I touched her hand. I'm sorry. I didn't know. How could you know? Delroy shrugged. I'm not one to whine about my problems on every corner. We sat in silence for a while longer, then went inside. I felt strangely relieved by the decision we'd made and by Delroy's candor. Something had changed between us. We were closer, more understanding of each other. After lunch, when Delroy had gone about her business, I decided to clean up my office. It still bothered me that Peyton was going through my papers, and I wanted to make sure everything was there. I was methodically going through the file folders when I came across an old box of Claiborne's papers. After he died, I'd hastily gone through the most important things: insurance, stocks, bank accounts. But there was still a lot left undone. I didn't have the energy to delve into the past, to reopen the wounds. Among the yellowed receipts and old letters, I found an envelope with bank statements from 5 years ago. Flipping through them, I noticed regular transfers to one Luella Tharp. The amount was small, $200 a month, but the payments had been steady since a date 20 years before Claiborne's death. Luella Tharp? I'd never heard that name before. Who is she? Why was Claiborne transferring money to her? An uneasy feeling stirred inside. 20 years is when Tamsin was born. Could it be that Claiborne? I caught my breath at the sudden realization. Did he have another woman? A child on the side? I put the statements aside, feeling suddenly devastated. For 5 years, I had lived with the certainty that I knew my husband, that our marriage, for all its ups and downs, had been honorable. And now that confidence has crumbled like a house of cards. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Luella Tharp is just a distant relative that Claiborne helped, or a former co-worker in trouble. But then, why did he never mention her? Why did he hide those payments? I carefully folded the statements back into the envelope. This warranted further investigation, but not today. I'd had too many revelations today as it was. That evening, as I was preparing dinner, the doorbell rang. Delroy stood on the doorstep with a newspaper in her hands. Had you been home all day? She asked without preamble. Yes, I answered, surprised at her tone. Why? No one came to see you? No. I frowned. Delroy, what's wrong? She handed me a newspaper open to the real estate page. Look. I ran my eyes over the page and froze. Among the pictures of houses for sale was a picture of my house. It was captioned, Charming Cottage in a Quiet Neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, well-maintained plot. Preview by appointment? What the? I couldn't believe my eyes. I didn't put anything on the market. I know, Delroy nodded. That's why I came. A car came by this afternoon while you were gone. A woman and a man. She opened the house with her key, and they walked around inside for about 20 minutes. Then they left. Peyton, I whispered, feeling the anger boiling up inside me. She has a spare key, but how dare she? Realtor, Delroy said confidently, appraising a house for sale. I slumped back in my chair, still holding the paper. Peyton hadn't just talked about selling. She'd already acted without asking my consent, without informing me, as if I was already incapacitated, like my opinion doesn't mean anything. What are you going to do? Delroy asked. I looked up at her, suddenly feeling strangely calm. I'm going to see Mr. Harlan tomorrow, sign all the papers on the house. I folded the paper. And then I'll call my daughter and tell her that the house is no longer for sale, because it's not mine anymore. Are you sure? Delroy looked at me closely. It's a big step. I'm absolutely sure, I answered. I've never been so sure in my life. After my conversation with Mr. Harlan and the strange payments in Claiborne's papers, I couldn't get Luella Tharp's name out of my head. Who was this woman, and why had my husband been sending her money every month for 20 years? The next morning, when Delroy came to help with the cleaning, I asked to borrow her laptop. After half an hour of searching, I found that Luella Tharp worked as a librarian at the Reading City Library. There was a picture of her on the website, a woman about 38 years old with dark hair and a serious expression. I stared at the photo for a long time, trying to find a resemblance to Claiborne or my daughters. There was something elusive about the line of her chin, the cut of her eyes. Or was it just something I wanted to see? On a sudden impulse, I called the library and made an appointment to meet Luella at the cafe across the street at 6:30. Delroy, I said, handing back my laptop, could you take me into town by 5 o'clock today? I need to meet a man. She looked at me carefully but didn't ask me anything. Sure. Where exactly? To the town library. There's a cafe across the street. The Morning Dew Cafe turned out to be a small, cozy place with a vintage interior. I chose a table in the corner and ordered tea. At 6:25, the door opened and Luella Tharp walked in, wearing a strict blue dress and neatly coiffed hair. Mrs. Bonham? She asked, coming to the table. Merle, please. I pointed to the chair opposite. Have a seat. Luella. She sat down with her hands folded in her lap. Your call surprised me. I stared at her, trying to see Claiborne in her features. Yes, there was definitely something, especially in the line of her eyebrows and the shape of her eyes. I found the bank statements, I said without preamble. Claiborne had been transferring money to you for 20 years, every month. Luella turned pale. I understand how you must feel, she said quietly, and I'm ready to answer your questions. Are you his daughter? I asked bluntly. Luella nodded. Yes, but he wasn't. It's not what you think. There was no adultery. You were born when Claiborne and I had already been married for 6 years. How could it not have been adultery? Luella took a deep breath. My mother, Virginia, knew Claiborne before you were married. They dated for a while. Then they broke up, and soon he met you. She was quiet for a moment. My mother found out about the pregnancy when you were already engaged. She didn't want to ruin your happiness and decided not to say anything. She left town, gave birth to me. Why did she tell him later? I asked. She didn't intend to. Luella shook her head. But when I was 7, she got seriously ill. Cancer. She knew she wasn't going to last, so she decided to find Claiborne, not for herself, for me, so I wouldn't be all alone. And he started to help. Yeah, not just with money. He came to visit whenever he could. After Mom died, he wanted to take me in with him, but I would have been against it. I finished for her, feeling bitter. He didn't know how to tell you, Luella said softly. First, he put it off. Then it was too late. Why didn't you contact me after he died? I asked. I didn't want to hurt you, she answered simply. You had just lost your husband. Why traumatize you further? But the payments stopped. I'm a grown woman with a job and a life of my own. Luella shrugged. I didn't need his money. He helped because he wanted to, not because I demanded it. Do you have any pictures of him? I asked suddenly. Luella pulled a small album out of her purse. I flipped through the pages slowly. Claiborne with a little girl in the park. Teenage Luella and Claiborne at a high school prom. Family holidays, birthdays, all the life I'd missed without realizing it existed. He loved you, I said, handing the album back. I could tell. He loved you too, Luella said quietly. He always spoke warmly of you, about you and Peyton and Tamsin. They don't know about you. No, Claiborne thought it would be hard for them to accept. As we were saying goodbye, Luella handed me her card. If you ever want to talk again, or if you decide to tell your sisters, I'd be glad to. I took the card and hugged her in surprise. Thank you for being honest and for not holding a grudge. For what? She was surprised. You didn't do anything wrong. I was the reason you couldn't live with your father. No, Luella said firmly. Circumstances and adult decisions were the reason. You were drawn into this situation without your knowledge, just as I was. On the way home, I told Delroy the whole story. She listened in silence, only occasionally casting sympathetic glances at me. What do you think? She asked me when I was done. I don't know, I answered honestly. First, I was shocked, then angry, now, just sad. So many years of a life based on lies. Not lies, Delroy countered. It's the silence. He wasn't lying to you. He just wasn't telling you the whole truth. What's the difference? Big difference. He could have left that girl, forgotten about her. But he didn't. He took care of her the best he could. That says good things about him, doesn't it? I've been thinking. Yes, Claiborne had been unfair to me, but he hadn't abandoned his child. Took responsibility, albeit secretly. We all have our skeletons in the closet, Delroy said philosophically. And you have a few now, too. I smiled involuntarily, remembering the remodeling of the house, which my daughters hadn't known about until now. Mr. Harlan had prepared the paperwork, and I'd signed the deed of gift with the right to live in it for life. A couple more weeks to register, and the house would be officially Delroy's. I hadn't told her about it, afraid it would change our relationship. What would happen when she found out I'd signed the house over to her? Wouldn't she feel obligated? Would our friendship become unequal? The next few days passed in relative peace. Delroy continued to stop by daily, but she no longer cleaned the house, just brought groceries, had coffee with me, and sometimes stayed for dinner. We talked a lot about her work at the hospital, my years at the post office, books, movies, politics. I learned that Delroy likes detectives and can't stand romantic comedies, that she votes Democrat but berates both parties equally, that she collects old vinyl records and knows how to play the harmonica. The next morning, as I was eating breakfast, the doorbell rang. Tamsin stood on the doorstep, pale, with circles under her eyes and a nervous expression on her face. "Hi, Mom," she said, walking uninvited into the house. "How are you?" "Better," I answered warily. "How are you?" "So-so." She plopped down in a chair. "Remember I told you about the gallery job? It didn't work out. They hired some girl with a degree in art history." "I'm sorry," I said sincerely. "Yeah." Tamsin drummed her fingers on the table. "Anyway, the apartment's still in trouble. The landlord's threatening to evict me if I don't pay by the end of the week." I sighed. So much for the real reason for the visit. "Tamsin, I told you before." "Mom, I know I was harsh last time," she interrupted. "I'm sorry about that. I was on edge. But the situation is really critical right now. I have no one else to turn to." "What about Peyton?" I asked. "He and Waldo are making good money." Tamsin snorted. "Peyton? Really? All she does is lecture me on fiscal responsibility. Besides, she's kind of obsessed with your house right now. She's been going on and on about how you need to move into a nursing home." "Did she tell you that too?" "Of course she did. She even showed me the brochures for those assisted living complexes." Tamsin made quotation marks with her fingers. "I think she just wants to sell the house and get the money." "Maybe," I nodded. "She'd brought a realtor here before, without my knowledge." "Really?" Tamsin looked outraged. "What a bitch! What are you going to do about it?" "I already did," I replied. "But let's get back to your question. How much do you need this time?" Tamsin was a little embarrassed. 1,200. "I know it's a lot, but I'll pay it back as soon as I get a job. I've already got a couple options." I looked at my daughter, 38 years old, still looking for herself, still living for the day. "No, Tamsin," I said firmly. "I'm not giving you money." Her eyes widened in surprise. What? But Mom? You're a grown woman, I continued. It's time you learn to solve your own problems. I'm trying, she exclaimed. But I need help now. Just this once. It's never just once, I shook my head. How many times have I given you money over the years? Dozens, and you've never paid me back. I'm your daughter, Tamsin raised her voice. Isn't that what parents are for? To help their children? To help, yes, I agreed, but not to support grown children who can work. Tamsin jumped up, her face contorted with anger. You're just a selfish old woman, she shouted, sitting here in your big house, saving money, while your own daughter could be on the street. Don't be so dramatic, I said tiredly. You can get a job, any kind of job, waitressing, saleswoman, just temporarily, until you find something you like. You don't understand. Tamsin grabbed the cup off the table and threw it to the floor. The porcelain shattered. I can't work anywhere. I have a college degree. Which you never applied in 15 years of college, I said, feeling the pressure building inside me. My head was starting to hurt, my temples throbbing. Fuck you. Tamsin kicked the chair and it fell with a clatter. You always loved Peyton more. Always. She's your perfect daughter and I'm the disappointment, right? I stood up, feeling weak in my legs. Tamsin, calm down, please. I love you both equally. It's just... Suddenly, the room swam before my eyes. I grabbed the edge of the table, but my legs gave out, and I started to sink to the floor. Mom? Tamsin's voice came from far away. Mom, what's wrong? I couldn't answer. The pain in my head was unbearable, and I felt nauseous. Out of the corner of my eye, I heard the front door open and Delroy's voice. What the hell is going on? Merle. Strong arms picked me up, keeping me from falling. I could vaguely make out Delroy's worried face leaning over me. Call an ambulance, she commanded Tamsin. Now. Yeah, I don't have my cell phone handy, Tamsin said, confused. Delroy gently sat me down on the floor, leaning me against the wall, and called an ambulance. What happened? She asked, turning to Tamsin. Why is she in this state? How should I know? Tamsin snapped at her. We were just talking, and suddenly she started to feel sick. Talking? Delroy nodded at the broken cup and the overturned chair. Sounds like a very peaceful conversation. None of your business. Tamsin grabbed her bag. Look, I can't stay late right now. I have a meeting. Since you're here, you'll keep an eye on her, right? Call me if there's anything serious. And before Delroy could answer, Tamsin was out the door. I heard her old car start up and drive away. Bitch, Delroy muttered, kneeling down beside me. Her own mother almost fainted, and she had a meeting to go to. It's okay, I said weakly. I'm better now. Don't say anything and save your strength, Delroy said. The ambulance will be here soon. She took my hand, and we sat like that, on the kitchen floor, among the shards of the broken cup, waiting for the paramedics to arrive. And despite the headache and the nausea, I felt strangely calm, because there was a person nearby who didn't run away at the first sign of trouble, a person I could count on. The white ceiling, the smell of antiseptic, the beeping of instruments, a hospital room. Again, I turned my head with difficulty and saw the IV next to the bed. A needle was stuck in my arm, from which a transparent tube stretched. Are you awake? Came a familiar husky voice. Delroy was sitting in the visitor's chair with a book on her lap. When she saw that I was awake, she put down her reading and moved closer. What happened? I asked, trying to remember how I'd gotten here. Hypertensive crisis, Delroy answered. My blood pressure skyrocketed. The doctor said it could have ended in a stroke. Lucky I got here in time. The memory was slowly coming back. Tamsin's visit, The argument, the broken cup, the sudden weakness, Delroy's voice demanding an ambulance, and then darkness. How long have I been here? 2 days. Delroy poured water from the carafe and helped me take a sip. It's Tuesday already. My daughters. I called both of them. Delroy interrupted. Told them you were in the hospital. Tamsin hung up, said she'd call me back. She didn't. Peyton said she'd be here yesterday. She didn't show up either. I closed my eyes. Why am I not surprised? Even now that I'm in the hospital, they find reasons not to show up. What did the doctor say? I asked, changing the subject. It's nothing serious, but they want to keep an eye on her. Age, recent surgery, stress. Delroy shrugged. You'll be here for a couple days. You've been here the whole time? Not the whole time. Stop by the house to change clothes, pick up books. But mostly I've been here. She grinned. I don't trust these nurses. I've worked so many years myself. I know how they can forget about a patient. I looked at Delroy gratefully. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes. But she looked alert. Thank you, I said quietly. Don't worry about it, she said. You should eat something. I brought some decent food. She nodded at the bag by the bed. Chicken broth and applesauce. Your stomach won't take much more than that. Delroy helped me to my feet and held up the cup of broth as I drank slowly. It was good, rich, with herbs and bits of chicken, not unlike the hospital broth I remembered from my previous hospitalization. We talked about nothing for a while. Then Delroy left. She had to go home to feed the cat. She promised to come back tonight with dinner. Left alone, I thought about how my life had turned out over the past month. The surgery, the betrayal of my daughters, the Claiborne mystery, the new decision about the house. Too many events for an old woman like me. After lunch, as I was dozing off, Peyton and Tamsin walked into the room. I opened my eyes and saw them cautiously approaching the bed, as if afraid to disturb the critically ill. Mom. Peyton gave me a strained smile. How are you feeling? Better, I answered, watching my daughters closely. They looked tense, as if they had come not to visit their sick mother, but to solve some unpleasant question. We were worried, Tamsin said, not looking me in the eye. That neighbor of yours called to say you were having a hypertensive crisis. Delroy, I corrected. Her name is Delroy, and yes, I had a crisis. Right after your visit, if you remember. Tamsin was embarrassed and looked away. Look, Mom, about that conversation. I overreacted. You were right. I should handle my own problems. That confession took me by surprise. It's not like Tamsin to admit she's wrong. Tamsin and I talked a lot, Peyton interjected, sitting down on the edge of the bed. And we've come to the conclusion that you really should move to a specialized facility. This incident just confirms that you need constant medical supervision. Oh, that's it. I can see why Tamsin's suddenly so compliant. They're in cahoots. I'm not going to any compound, I said firmly. And we've already discussed this. Mom, be reasonable, Peyton said in the tone she used with her children. You live alone. You have health problems. What if the next attack happens when no one's around? I talked to Mr. Royce, Tamsin continued, encouraged. He's in real estate. Said your house could be a very good deal right now. The neighborhood has gone up in value, and a lot of young families are looking for houses like yours. Have you two talked about selling my house yet? I could feel the anger boiling up inside of me. While I was in the hospital? Not the sale, but the possibility of selling, Peyton corrected. We're just exploring our options. After all, it's in your best interest. It's in my best interest to decide what to do with my house, I said. Of course, Mom, Peyton hastened to agree. But while you're temporarily incapacitated, we need to think about the future. Temporarily incapacitated? I couldn't believe my ears. I had a hypertensive crisis, not a lobotomy. I'm completely lucid and perfectly capable of making decisions. We know, Tamsin intervened, but the doctor said you need rest and a stress-free environment. We just want to take some of the worry out of it. I could see through their fake concern. They've already mentally divided the money from the house sale, maybe even discussed who gets what furniture and stuff. Like vultures circling a dying animal, they couldn't wait to scavenge what was left of my life. We found a great complex in the suburbs, Peyton continued, pulling out a glossy brochure. Sun terraces, there's a pool, a library, art classes, and nurses around the clock. I took the booklet and silently flipped through it. Smiling seniors played board games, did yoga, sat in chairs with books. Picture perfect for lonely old age. How much does it cost? I asked, closing the booklet. Not cheap, Peyton admitted, but if we sell the house, we'll have enough money to live on for years, and Tamsin and I will supplement if necessary. How noble, I was being sarcastic. And what happens to my stuff? The furniture your father and I spent years putting together? His books? His tools? You can take some of it with you, Peyton replied. The rest, well, we could divide between us what has sentimental value, and the rest we could sell with the house or give to charity. I closed my eyes, feeling tired. They weren't even trying to hide their intentions. In their eyes, I was already waste material that needed to go somewhere else, out of the way. We don't have to decide now, Tamsin added, seeing my reaction. Just think about it. Peyton's right. You'd be better off with people your own age, with supervision. At that moment, the door of the room opened, and Delroy entered with a bag in her hands. She was followed by a young nurse who wanted to say something, but stopped talking at the sight of the visitors. Oh, we have a full house, Delroy said, giving my daughters a cold stare. A family reunion at the bedside. We were just leaving, Peyton said hurriedly, rising. Mom's tired. She needs her rest. Of course, Delroy nodded, especially from talking like this. She nodded at the booklet I was still holding. Peyton blushed, but didn't say anything. Tamsin fidgeted nervously with the strap of her purse. We'll come back tomorrow, Mom, Peyton said, leaning over to kiss my cheek. Rest up and get your strength back. When they left, Delroy plopped into a chair and set the food containers out of the bag. Did you get processed again? She asked, nodding at the door my daughters had left behind. How did you know? I smiled weakly. By their happy faces, Delroy snorted. And the booklet, let me see it. She glanced at the sun terraces and tossed the booklet dismissively on the nightstand. I know these places. Nice packaging for getting rid of old people. They smile sweetly while they have money. When they run out, they start optimizing services. I sighed. They want to sell my house. They've already found a realtor. That's what I thought, Delroy nodded. But it's not going to work. The house isn't yours anymore, remember? They don't know yet. It's time to tell them. I will, I nodded, as soon as I get out of here. There was another knock at the door. Luella Tharp was there, with a bouquet of wildflowers and an uncertain smile. May I? She asked quietly. Luella? I was surprised and delighted at the same time. Of course, come in. Delroy eyed the visitor suspiciously. I brought flowers. Luella held out a bouquet. I wanted to see how you were feeling. I called your house several times, but no one answered. Then I decided to stop by and saw the house was empty. The neighbors said you were in the hospital. That's very kind of you. I was touched by her concern. Have a seat. I'd like you to meet Delroy Scullin, my neighbor, and, I stammered, not knowing how to introduce Delroy. A friend, Delroy finished for me. And who are you? Luella Tharp, she answered, holding out her hand. Yeah, an acquaintance of Merle's. She's Claiborne's daughter, I said, deciding not to take too long to explain. From another woman, we've only recently met. Delroy's eyebrows rose, but she quickly managed her surprise and shook Luella's hand. I see. Well, it's nice to meet you. Merle's friends are my friends. Luella relaxed a little and sat down in the chair by the bed. I wanted to offer my help, she said. If you need anything, I could bring books, groceries, or just some company. Thank you, sweetheart. I was touched by her offer. But Delroy had already taken on the role of my caregiver. Really, there's something you could do for me. Anything, Luella answered sincerely. I need to get someone together in one place for an important conversation. I looked at Delroy, then at Luella. You, Delroy, Peyton, and Tamsin, all of you together. Why? Delroy frowned. It's time to set the record straight, I said firmly. I'm tired of not telling the truth and secrets. Tomorrow morning, here in the room, if the doctor says it's okay, of course. Luella looked uncertain. Do you want to tell them about me? Are you sure that's a good idea? It might upset them. They're already upset, I shrugged. They'll be even more upset when they find out about the house, so we can do it all at once. The house? Luella asked. It's a long story, I sighed. I'll tell it tomorrow, all at once. The next morning, at 10 o'clock sharp, everyone gathered in my room. Peyton and Tamsin were the first to arrive, with strained smiles and new Active Living Complexes booklets. Delroy came next, as always with a bag of homemade food. Luella came last, nervously rubbing the strap of her purse. Who's that? Peyton asked at once, looking around at the stranger. Have a seat, everyone, I said, feeling strangely calm. I have news that concerns all of you. My daughters looked at each other, clearly puzzled by the situation. Delroy settled back in her chair, crossing her arms over her chest. Luella remained standing at the door, as if ready to flee at any moment. I've gathered you here to clarify a few things, I began. First, I know about your plans to sell my house. I looked at Peyton and Tamsin. But I have news for you. The house is no longer mine. What? Peyton stepped forward. What do you mean it's not yours? I signed it over to Delroy, I said calmly. 2 weeks ago. The deed's already been registered. There was a deafening silence in the room. Peyton turned pale. Tamsin opened her mouth in surprise. Delroy looked at me with shock. I never told her the process was complete. You did what? Peyton finally squeezed out. I signed the house over to Delroy, I repeated, with a life estate for me. So I'm not moving, and the house isn't for sale. You can't, Tamsin jumped up. This is our inheritance. We're your children. The kids who didn't take the time to pick me up from the hospital, I replied flatly. The kids who planned to sell my house while I was in the hospital. Kids who see me as a burden to get rid of. That's not true, Peyton was outraged. We care about you. We want you to live a comfortable, supervised life. I'm already being taken care of. I nodded at Delroy. Free and willing, but you only come here when you need something. Merle, I can't take over the house. Delroy interjected. It's too much. It's too late. I shook my head. The papers are signed and registered. The house is yours. We'll contest the deal, Peyton hissed, clenching her fists. You were incapacitated. That woman took advantage of your weakness and, she said. Stop it, I cut her off. I was in my right mind, and Mr. Harlan will attest to that. It was my decision, and I don't regret it. How could you, Mom? There were tears in Tamsin's eyes. To give everything to a stranger and not your own children? Delroy is not a stranger, I answered quietly. She was there for me when I was sick. She helped me unselfishly, expecting nothing in return, which is more than I can say for you. And that's not all, I continued, turning my gaze to Luella. This is Luella Tharp. She's Your half-sister. What? Peyton and Tamsin exclaimed in unison. Your father's daughter by another woman, I explained. He found out about her when she was 7, and he's been helping her all these years, secretly from me. Peyton looked at Luella as if she'd seen a ghost. Tamsin looked from her to me and back again. It's impossible, Peyton whispered. Dad would never. He didn't cheat on me, if that's what you mean, I said. Luella was conceived before we met, but he's been hiding her existence all these years. And you're cool with that? Tamsin was surprised. He lied to you? Yes, he did, I agreed. But I understand why. He was afraid of my reaction, of your reaction. And yet he didn't abandon his child. He cared as much as he could. I respect him for that. Luella stepped forward. I don't claim a place in your family, she said quietly, turning to her sisters. I don't expect you to accept me. I just wanted to meet you. Father has told me a lot about you. I don't know anything about you, Peyton said coldly. And I'm not sure I want to know. My father was an honest man. He wouldn't. Your father was a living man, I interrupted, with his mistakes and his secrets, like all of us. There was a heavy silence in the room. I looked at my daughters, trying to see in their faces echoes of the childlike love that had once illuminated our relationship. But all I saw was anger, resentment, and greed. I'll contest the deed of gift, Peyton finally said, rising. I have a good lawyer, and I'll prove that you were incapacitated when you signed the papers. You can try, I shrugged. Just don't forget that Mr. Harlan, who did the paperwork, has known me for 30 years, and he wouldn't have done the deal if he doubted my capacity. Come on, Tamsin. Peyton headed for the door. There's nothing more to talk about here. Tamsin hesitated, glancing back and forth at me and Luella. Mom, you can't do this to us. Her voice shook. We are your daughters, your own blood. Blood isn't what matters, I said quietly. It's who's there for you when you're sick, who lends a hand without expecting anything in return. Tamsin shook her head and followed Peyton. She turned around at the door. You're going to regret this, Mom. When you're alone. She's not alone, Delroy said firmly. She won't be alone. When the door closed behind my daughters, there was silence in the room. Gee, Delroy finally said, you've set a real bombshell. They're very upset, Luella said. Maybe in time. I don't think so, I shook my head. They won't forgive me for the house. Never. Merle, Delroy leaned toward me. I seriously can't accept your house. It's too much. You can, I took her hand. And you already have. The papers are signed. But if it'll make you feel better, just think of it as looking after it while I'm alive. And then you'll decide what to do with him. Delroy sighed but didn't argue. 2 days later, I was released from the hospital. This time, Delroy and Luella were waiting for me at the front door. The nurse wheeled me out in a wheelchair, as was the rule, and helped me into Delroy's old pickup truck. Are you comfortable? Delroy asked, starting the engine. Quite, I smiled, looking at Luella, who sat next to me in the back seat. We pulled out of the hospital parking lot and headed towards the house. I stared out the window at the streets of Redding, the town that had become my home 37 years ago. So many memories, so many stories tied to these streets, houses, parks. Here I was a young mother, then a grandmother, then a widow. And now, at the age of 68, I suddenly found a new family, not by blood, but by choice. Strange, unexpected, but perhaps more real than the one I'd had all these years. I didn't know what lay ahead, whether my daughters would forgive me, accept my decision, whether Luella would accept her new sisters if they ever wanted to hang out with her. But one thing I knew for sure was that I was no longer alone. There were people around me who really cared about me, and looking out the window at my hometown, I felt calm and confident about the future for the first time in a long time.